Imagine this. You are going to drop off your kid at baseball practice, and your husband is across the city, probably like maybe let's say next city across, and dropping off your daughter at gymnastics. You're in the middle of getting them ready, packing the bags out, getting ready for baseball, and you get a text from your dad saying your mom has lost all of her medications, and they're spilled all over the floor everywhere. What do you do? In that situation, you're literally trying to figure it out. Your siblings are not in town, they're actually out of state. So it's just you. What do you do? This situation, this circumstance, this experience happens so much to families throughout the nation. And it's not easy. In this live, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a specific patient and take you through all of the care options that you can receive for your loved one at home, specifically when it comes to your loved one dealing with dementia. Let's walk through this together. Hey, Charlotte family. Hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to another weekly live where we talk about care options for your loved one at home. And it is almost September, which is crazy. And we're bringing JT, who's our executive director, hop him in here and let's get it going. How you doing, JT?
So good afternoon, Charles. How's it going?
Hey, good. Not too bad. Not too bad. How's the week treating you so far?
Good. Last week of August somehow already, but
It's
excited
crazy.
for the cooler temps. We had a
Yeah.
record. If you're from Dallas joining us, record 109 yesterday.
Yeah, I was telling somebody, I was like, I have like my car is black, and I was like, you could just throw an egg on there and just make a skillet, make an omelet. It's that hot.
Pretty much.
So yeah, if you have loved ones that are seniors, even yourself, if you guys are out there, make sure you guys are hydrating because it is super hot. So, but yeah, if you're joining us, welcome. Thanks for hopping on. What we've been doing over the last couple months is really walking families through the different care options. We've been focusing more on hospice, and specifically, there's been more of a need to educate on all the care options at home. And so, if you have been joining us each month, we've been focusing on a specific diagnosis, and this month we're focusing on dementia, and it's been really good. JT, we've talked to so many families throughout the last 23 years, and a lot of it is just it's confusing to understand care options at home. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, and dementia is a really complicated diagnosis. Not to say any diagnosis is easy, but dementia specifically, there's so many levels to it.
Yeah.
Where, like you kind of illustrated in the introduction, it comes at the most inconvenient time. There's serious concerns of safety and
Yeah.
the house and
Yeah.
stoves, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors, and so we like to educate families to know what you can get under insurance, what you can pay for, and then just what other options are out there as far as taking care of your parents, because you can't always be there for them,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. And so, what we're doing in this, if you're hopping on, we're going to go through a patient scenario, one that we've taken care of, and we kind of hide and change their identity. So for HIPAA purposes, but that way you can step into their shoes and understand, okay, does this sound like my loved one? Does this sound like someone I know? And we're going to walk you guys through all the care options that you can receive at home. So we always start with stats and facts. So JT, let's break down the stats of why this is important for really everyone to kind of have a good understanding and to know.
Yeah, yeah. Like Charles said, we always like to introduce this because we know in the U.S. that in just 4 years, 1 in 5 people will be over 65. We know in Plano, where we are here at Charlotte, 1 in 2 people will be over the age of 65. And so the other important side of that is that those people that are over 65, 90% of them want to age in place.
Yeah.
And so in place means in the home that they've lived in 40 years, in a assisted living facility with all these new friends they've met, but they don't want to go back and forth to the hospital. They don't want to go to a temporary home, and so in place is an important thing to know about your parents and where they want to be. And so some of the care options we're going to dive into can help reach that goal.
Yeah, yeah. And when we're looking at that kind of care options, we're going to kind of highlight a lot of these. This pyramid is kind of the things that you can think of when you're talking about care at home, whether you're going through insurance or private pay. You've got the tier of home health, which will kind of walk you guys through personal care, palliative care, and then hospice care. And so, when you look at this pyramid, you think of, okay, this is super confusing. If you've never had to even experience this, if you're in that sandwich generation like we talked about in the very beginning, where you're dropping off your kid at baseball and your husband's across the way dropping off daughter at gymnastics, and then you get a call from mom and you're like, whoa, I have no idea what's going on. Mom and dad have been stable. They've never had any health issues. Where do you start? And I think this is kind of why it's so important to have a good understanding of it. And so we'll break down specifically Miss Margaret. We're going to talk about her story. A great baker. She could throw down. She was so good. And so we're going to highlight her specifically. But this month, like we talked about dementia is our specific focus, clinical focus this month. And so when you think about dementia, it's a general term that means decline, whether it's memory, thinking, decision making, and it interferes with everyday life. So it's not like you forgetting where your keys are one time, right? It's a consistent uh, decline in memory and thinking and processes, which could lead to needing help with bathing, needing help with eating, needing help with medications, mobility, safety. And so when you look at it at a whole, this is a very simple definition for you to have an understanding, and it's diagnosed by a doctor. And it's crazy that 1 in 9 Americans over the age of 65, they have Alzheimer's or some type of dementia, which is wild. And we see it a lot all the time, JT.
Yeah, and there's different types of dementia that we'll talk about. It can be induced by a stroke. It can be something that's kind of runs in the family, and so when we see it come up, sometimes it totally catches families by surprise,
Yep.
and sometimes the daughter of the patient remembers when their grandma had the same symptoms, and
Yeah.
so it really is a complex and difficult situation to step into,
Mhm.
and so we want to make sure that you all know that you're not alone when you're dealing with it, because there is support out there for you,
Yeah.
and we can kind of get into Miss Margaret's story.
Yeah, Miss Margaret, great baker. Her and her husband had a bakery for about 30 years. They ended up retiring later down the road, and just really taking care of her daughters. And that was her thing. She just loved to cook and loved making amazing muffins and cakes and pies for birthdays. And that's a story like everybody. We all have our stories, right? And as we continue to age, aging looks different for everybody. But things that you used to do or used to love, sometimes you're not able to do them anymore. But she did. She continued to bake even while she was in her 80s. But there were some things that everyone began to notice, right? She forgot to add sugar to her famous sweet potato pie, right? Like she forgot, different specific things, but it got to the point where it got worse. And so her daughter said, okay, we need to figure this out. And then hence their doctor diagnosed her with dementia. And so we kind of now go back to specifically the intro, where now those meds are everywhere. What do I do? Like who can I call to get help? Specifically for, like, maybe she needs help with bathing from time to time. Don't need someone out there all the time, but maybe just a few hours, a couple times a week. Mom and dad are still pretty strong, but they just need an extra layer of supervision. And that's where the first pyramid that we talked about, or the second pyramid that we talked about, is personal care services. So JT, can you break down what is personal care services for someone like Miss Margaret and her daughter to figure out, like, what can she get?
Yeah, and personal care, home care, personal care at home.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different terms for it out there, but what it is it's non-skilled is what we're going to call it, assistance with your ADLs, your activities of daily living. And so, um, like Margaret's story, maybe it's bathing or getting dressed, maybe it's meal preparation, cleaning up the house, their living area, changing sheets. things that they used to be able to do independently, that all of us maybe could do independently once upon a time. But now you need a little extra support. You don't need your physical therapist quite yet in there running you through exercise programs
Yeah.
or personal torture, as Charles calls it.
Yeah,
Um,
PT is personal torturers, right?
uh,
Physical therapists.
but personal care is there to supplement the family where, it's starting to become a lot, especially for that sandwich generation,
Right.
someone that is managing little kids and managing these aging parents and their own jobs and responsibilities. And so they can hire a personal care or home care company to come in and do that. And so it's funded, either you pay privately for it, you pay cash, usually hourly, set up a contract with the company. Some have minimums, minimum stays, minimum hours at a time. Uh, Ask your parents if they have a long term care insurance plan. It's something that not everyone knows, or has, but it can cover personal care services, and so they can authorize it. Reach out to your insurance broker about that. And then for the veterans that are out there, they have a great homemaker aid service program under
Yep.
the VA. And so if you've never even been to the VA before, never wanted to go to the VA before, the program is not too difficult to get into, and can be a huge help with no out of pocket costs for the veterans that deserve it. And so that's personal care. So that's kind of the maybe the first level of extra help that you can get at home.
Yeah, I think a lot of the pain points, that we kind of talk to families about is affordability of that, right? So let's say, the first question that we usually ask families is, okay, is your loved one a veteran or they're honorably discharged? Okay, great. Then let's start there, right? Or, do they have a long-term care insurance plan that they've been paying into for a long time now? Long-term care insurance and your normal medical insurance are two different, very different things, right? And so a lot of times families will get confused. The medical insurance can cover an aide to come out and be there. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It's a specific long-term care insurance plan that your loved one has maybe paid into, a couple bucks a month, for a long time, that way they can draw down on it and utilize those funds for something like this. And then also Medicaid, right? Let's say your loved one is on Medicaid and has qualified for Medicaid. There are some benefit programs where you can get some aid services to come out a few times a week. So, cost is the biggest thing that we hear a lot with families, but there is ways for you to navigate that or utilize family, right? Maybe you have a niece or a nephew who's in high school and they're trying to make a buck or something, how do you help and work together? Because it does take a village. We've seen that a lot with families. It takes a village to really make sure that Miss Margaret is okay at home and safe at home.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, great job. So, another thing that we kind of think about is, okay, we have that layer of personal care services, but now Miss Margaret is starting to get a little bit more weaker. So personal care is that non-skilled services, but then we're looking at, okay, maybe she needs a nurse and a physical therapist to come in and to help her, and not just to be there to help her with like cooking and things like that, but there's like another layer clinically that we need an expert in the home, and so that's where home health is initiated by a doctor, and that doctor will write that order. And so JT, can you kind of walk us through now? Miss Margaret has that personal care services. She's got a couple hours, maybe a week, and to kind of help with medications and cooking and maybe taking her to a doctor's office. And now she's got that in place. But now, what's this next layer of home health? What can you walk us through that?
Yeah, yeah. Let's get into home health. It sounds a lot like home care, or personal care, but it's a lot of homes and a lot of care.
Homes
But
and care.
but home health, this is now we're going to call skilled care. And so, Charles, you just mentioned nurses. So that's RNs, LVNs, CNAs, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, social workers. These are all licensed professionals who have been contracted through an agency that's contracted with Medicare or a commercial insurance plan to deliver this skilled care. And so it's not as easy, you could say, as personal care. Like, personal care, you can start right away,
Mhm.
because it's paid in cash. There's not the same type of regulation. But home health has to be ordered by a physician. So this might be if they're in the hospital and they're going to come home from the hospital, might be that doctor that's in the hospital. Otherwise, it could be a PCP, primary care physician or a specialist doctor like a cardiologist, who identifies the need for medication management or symptom management because they're seeing changes at these doctor's appointments, but they don't know what's happening in between. And
Yeah.
so that's where home health comes in. And so not just anyone can get home health. You have to be homebound. So that doesn't mean bed bound or chair bound.
Right.
That just means it's a taxing effort to leave the home. There's a wheelchair, a walker, oxygen. There's these things that makes it a taxing effort. Medicare calls it, and then they have to have a need for it. So as much as we'd love for our nurses and therapists to be able to just come and watch old shows and be a companion
Yeah.
to these patients, they do have to have a Medicare certified need for one of these disciplines to come in there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the biggest things that we see families ask us is like, "Oh, how long is it going to be for?" Or, "How long is it going to, can I have my nurse forever and my PT forever?" And when you think about Medicare and when they started home health, it was really meant for post-acute care. So, right? So when you come out of the hospital, you come out of rehab and you have an event, a fall, or you fall and you cut yourself and there's a big wound, like all of these are events. Home health is initiated to stabilize, to help the family become independent in these outcomes, maybe a new diagnosis. And so we always like to educate. What the best home health do is they educate the families on why we're here, what's our purpose, and how we can help you in this season to clinically stabilize your loved one. And I think, we hear, I mean, I wish you could have an aide come out, be there 5 times a week, but if that was the case, Medicare will have no more money. So, it's just the reality. We see it all the time, JT.
Yeah, yeah, and home health, it's done in 60-day,
Mhm.
certification periods, and so you come out of the hospital, you have 60 days of care. They set up a frequency of how often someone will come, who's coming, and when. And then at the end of those 60 days, if there's still a need, if you're still homebound, if your physician still agrees, then the home health company will recertify you for another 60. And so some patients only need 60 days before they're ready to,
Yeah,
we'll talk about, not dementia, but like a joint replacement. You just need someone to come in, make sure that knee is healed, make sure
yeah,
that wound, that scar looks good, and then get the knee moving a little bit. And once you're good enough to go to an outpatient PT clinic, that's where home health stops. So it might be short like that, or it might be someone who, they keep having new symptoms, new
yeah,
medications, unfortunately, keep falling, things like that, where home health might be there 60, 120, 180 days, maybe even a year. And so it's definitely case by case. But your home health team is there to educate you and hopefully not have you on their services
yeah.
because, like we said, we're trying to help you regain independence.
Right, right. And that's that. I think the beautiful thing about home health is now you think of Margaret's daughter, who is, now she's still juggling the sandwich generation, juggling her kids, right? But she has now two things in her mind. She now has peace of mind knowing that there is maybe a personal care company there to kind of help buffer, and then there's home health there also to help clinically buffer, right? Because now she has a go to point of contact, maybe one nurse or two nurses that are consistently seeing mom, a therapist that's consistently seeing mom, and figuring out, okay, this is what we're doing this week. Here are the list of exercises that we gave her to do this week, right? And so at least it gives a little bit of peace of mind. It doesn't take away the stress and the toughness of dementia and the disease, and losing the things that your mom used to do, but it does help to guide you through it. And I think that's the biggest thing that we see families appreciate, is that guidance and that clinical lead from home health to know what to expect and when to expect it when it comes to the diagnosis. So yeah, it's huge, it's huge. So now Miss Margaret is she's not doing too well. Like, we'll kind of fast forward a little bit, and she's starting now to decline more because the disease itself is taking more of a toll on her. Another fall came up, another hospital stay. Home health was in there continuing to do plan of care and interventions to help with the dementia, but it just kept getting more and more. She started to lose weight. She became more lethargic and sleeping more and not eating more, and it just the disease, is taking her toll on her life. And that's where, that last time she went to the hospital, the doctor was like, you may want to consider hospice services for your mom because she can qualify for those services. And I think a lot of times we've done this over the last couple months, just educating families on hospice, and the word is super scary. It's not something that you usually hear about in a random day, like, oh yeah, mom started hospice, and you just keep talking about like life, right? Cowboys, football, school, hospice. You don't do that. And I think the reason why is because when we talk about hospice, we think about death, right? We think about end of life. And what we've been doing is educating families on, if your loved one qualifies, and if their wishes line up, which is important to know what their wishes are. If everything lines up and this is what they desire, then hospice is a benefit that's available through Medicare and insurance, for families. And JT, we see that all the time. Like that
Yeah.
question of like, what is it?
Yeah, and it has a tough rep in pop culture.
Yeah,
It's quick, it's the last day, things like that. And
yeah,
so, what we've been doing since January and kind of focusing in on is we like to call like a hospice 101.
yep,
Just like anything else, the For Dummies books back in the day,
yeah,
but
yeah,
um, anything like that, we want to ease the conversation in, because it's not an easy one to have. But the benefits of hospice are even all the great things you've heard so far about home health and personal care. There's even more support covered under Medicare, a benefit and a right that you've paid into and have accumulated your whole life, that's there for you at this time. And so that team, just like the home health team, has nurses, social worker, but now instead of therapists and we call aggressive treatment or
hmm,
looking for that independence as a goal, now the goal is quality of life and comfort. And so a chaplain is super important for
yeah,
that spiritual care that comes with that, being able to talk about end of life, not just for the patient but for the family. You still have that aid that comes out now under hospice. It's more frequent than under home health, because it's so important for dignity and quality of life that patients positioned and kept clean and
yeah,
able to feel comfortable. And there's a special hospice physician that oversees all of those people as well. And so that's the team. And then the other side, we won't get too deep into it today, but medications are covered under hospice that are delivered to the house. Equipment like a hospital bed, wheelchair, walker, all those things you see in a rehab or in a hospital facility, are there at the home now, so that we're not going back and forth to the hospital
yeah,
anymore. There's 24/7 coverage. So say there is a fall in the middle of the night, or say the medications get mixed up, or there's a new symptom, some more pain or discomfort, now you call your hospice company instead of calling 911.
yeah,
You don't have to wait for business hours for your PCP to get back to you. And so there's all of this support that comes around you. We like to compare it a lot of times to the birth of a child.
yeah,
When you come into the world, you're surrounded by this village, all these important people, doctors, nurses, family members, everyone coordinating. It's like a symphony.
yeah.
Same for the end of life. Everyone comes around the patient as well underneath hospice care. And so that's kind of hospice in a nutshell, as we would say.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the biggest thing is, when you think of the word hospice, when we talk to families, a lot of times it's it's specifically clinically making sure that your loved one does qualify for these services, and then understanding that the best hospices, not every hospice is the same, right? And so a lot of times when you're at the hospital and you get a big list of hospices, what we like to always educate and help families do is, the best hospices, what they do is that they'll tailor towards your loved ones and really educate, and it's really about, okay, these are the medications that are covered and not covered and the reason why, right? This is what, and these are all covered by Medicare, right? So it's there's rules that have to be followed if the government's going to pay for things, right? And so the best hospices will do the best they can to educate you and take your time and say, okay, this is the team that you have. These are the supplies that are given, through our agency of what Medicare will cover. Sometimes families want like the Cadillac of like the supplies, or the Cadillac of the equipment. This is what is offered through Medicare. If you want to do anything outside of that, we see families buy certain things that they want, and there's no problem with that. But it's just a communication of knowing, okay, this is what to expect. And then the clinical pathway, right? So based off of what's happening with mom, we see that, hey, these are the medications that we may want to look at, if you're comfortable with, to help her if she's having more pain as we get closer. So there's so many things, the stigmas that we hear about morphine and overdosing on medications. A lot of that is because the hospices that they may experience may not walk the families through that. And it's your right to say no, you don't want this. It's your right to pick the right one so that you have a good experience. And so it's such a great benefit, for families. JT, who pays for hospice? We talked about Medicare, but who else pays for hospice if you're not Medicare age? How does that work?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So hospice is covered under Part A of Medicare, so that same level that covers hospital stays, rehab stays. For anyone that's under the age of 65, we always recommend you reach out to your insurance directly,
Mhm.
your United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, whatever it may be, because you may have a hospice benefit, even if you're not of Medicare age. And for anyone that doesn't have either of those things, there are private pay options as well, to pay for that same amount of support that is provided under Medicare's benefit. And so it sounds like too good to be true as far as how much the families get.
Mhm.
But like I said earlier, it's something you pay into your whole life, as far as Medicare goes. And so they've set aside and designated a lot of this for you for this time.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because, when you have, let's we go back to Margaret and her being on personal care, and then when she, needed home health, she received home health through the orders from the doctor, and then they picked home health. But so the question that we get a lot of times is, can you be on home health and hospice at the same time too? Because it's specifically through Medicare, Part A. Families can sometimes still have personal care services, have their loved one, a caregiver, come and help them. They're paying out of pocket for those services. And then hospice comes in as that layer, clinical layer, based off of the diagnosis. And so you look at this pyramid again, you see the home health and personal care, and then palliative care, which is specialized for pain and symptom management. A lot of families, when they want to pursue aggressive treatment, they want to constantly keep going back and forth to the hospital. Then you're not going to see hospice picked, because hospice is really saying, okay, we now are all on the same page to agree to this plan of care under hospice. We don't want to go back and forth to the hospital. We don't want to seek aggressive treatment. And so you see that level of being kind of like the final point when it comes to care at home. So, but you see the palliative care side when you're looking at palliative care, aggressive treatment, continuing to do specific surgeries, right? And families are doing that, and it's beautiful because we see families have cancer, be on palliative care, beat cancer, and it's cool. And so, but it's just tailored towards families' wishes and what the family needs at that time. And so, we see Miss Margaret now. She's on hospice at home. She's got AIDS. She's got her grandkids coming in, baking some cinnamon. Is that buntinis or what are those? No, they're cinnamon
Cinnamon
cakes.
rolls.
Cinnamon rolls. I should know that, right? Cinnamon rolls. And they look good, right? And so she's, enjoying her final days. That's her wishes. That's what she desires. And everyone's on the same page. And I think that's the beautiful thing about hospice services is, if everyone is in a line, then it makes sense. For some families, it doesn't make sense, right? But these are just options that we want to make sure that everyone knows, and can choose and can pick from as well. And so, yeah, as we kind of come to a close, JT, are some final thoughts that we can kind of talk about when we're thinking about these three pillars, specifically four pillars with palliative care. What are some things that you can kind of bring it home for everybody?
Yeah, yeah, we talked a lot. So
Yeah.
we appreciate everyone hanging on here for a half hour with us on
Yeah.
your lunch or at home, wherever you may be. But yeah, there's a lot of options out there. You're not alone in trying to figure this out. And so we always recommend for us, if you are in DFW, call our office, fill out a form on the website. A lot of companies, if they're run the right way, will be willing to talk you through
Yeah.
these situations. And there's nothing committing about just having a conversation,
Yeah.
understanding, do I qualify for home health, or does my parent qualify for home health? There's some signs and symptoms. Ask your doctor's office at your next PCP visit with them. Say, hey, I just heard about home health, hospice care. What do you think about that, doc? Because it looks different for everybody. We can't say, there's one true path,
Right.
one walkway for everyone. And so reach out to us either there at our website, charlene.org. Um, Check out our other YouTube videos. We've talked about other diagnoses that aren't dementia. We've gone really deep into hospice care, deep into personal care, things like that. But at the end of the day, you're not alone for this time, this season. And so we're here for you. We'll be back here next Tuesday.
Yep.
We'll be talking about a new diagnosis in the month of September, which is next week.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure seeing you guys. You guys have a blessed week. And if you need anything, let us know. We'll see you next week. God bless.